The stark and uncompromising nature of Vladimir Putin's demands for ending the war has placed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy in an exceedingly difficult position, forcing him to navigate the treacherous terrain between the survival of his nations and the preservation of its sovereignty. These demands are not merely negotiating points, but a direct challenges to the very existence of Ukraine as an independent, westward-leaning state. They constitute a blueprint for capitulation, a vision of a future where Ukraine is territorially diminished, militarily neutered, and politically subservient to Moscow. For President Zelenskyy, who has become a global symbol of resistance, the personal and political pressure is immense. He must rally his people for protracted struggle while simultaneously engaging with international partners to maintain the flow of critical support, all under the shadow of an ultimatum that offers peace only at the cost of freedom. The Kremlin's term, forcefully restated and amplified through its state-controlled media, are a clear message to Kyiv. The path to ending the bloodshed runs through a fundamental reordering of the Ukrainian state, one that aligns with Russia's strategic interests and historical grievance. The psychological weight of these demands on the Ukrainian leadership cannot be overstated, as they are designed not just to achieve military objectives, but to break the national will and impose a sense of inevitability about Russian dominance. A central and politically explosive demand is that Ukraine must alter its constitution to guarantee neutrality and abandon its long-held aspiration of joining the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. This is not a simple policy shift, it is a demand for foundational change in Ukraine's national identity and strategic direction. In recent years, Ukraine's constitution has enshrined membership in both NATO and the European Union as a strategic goal, a decision supported by a significant majority in the country's parliament and reflecting a broad societal consensus that the nation's future lies with the West. For President Zelenskyy to even entertain the idea of reversing this course would be to risk a catastrophic loss of domestic political support. It would be seen as a betrayal of the sacrifices made since the Revolution of Dignity and, more acutely, since the full-scale invasion began. The pursuit of NATO membership is not an abstract foreign policy objective for Ukrainians. It is perceived as the only credible long-term security guarantee against a neighbor that has repeatedly demonstrated its willingness to violate Ukraine's sovereignty. To relinquish this ambition under duress would be to validate the Kremlin's narrative that sovereign nations in its perceived sphere of influence do not have the right to self-determination. The demand for constitutional change is thus a demand that Zelenskyy dismantle a key pillar of his nation's post-Soviet identity and accept a future of enforced vulnerability, a proposition that is politically untenable and nationally unacceptable. Equally insurmountable is the demand for Ukraine to formally cede vast swaths of its territory. This includes recognizing Russia's annexation of Crimea, which occurred over a decade ago, and accepting the incorporation of 4 other regions, Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson, into the Russian Federation. This is a demand for the dismemberment of Ukraine, a country whose post-independence border were recognized by Russia itself in multiple international agreements, including the Budapest Memorandum. To agree to such terms would be a violation of the Ukrainian constitution, which explicitly prohibits the ceding of any territory. Beyond the legal and constitutional barriers, there is the profound human and moral dimension. These territories are home to millions of Ukrainian citizens who would be abandoned to foreign occupation, facing the suppression of their language, culture, and identity. The regions are not just lines on a map, they are the industrial heartland of the country, rich in coal and other mineral resources, and provide critical access to the sea, which is vital for Ukraine's economy. The port city of Mariupol in the Donetsk region, for example, was a major hub for steel and grain exports before being devastated by Russian force. The Zaporizhia region hosts Europe's largest nuclear power plant, the control of which has significant energy and security implications. The loss of these territories would not only be a crippling economic blow, but also a strategic disaster, leaving Ukraine with a much longer and more difficult to defend border with an aggressive Russia. President Zelenskyy has consistently and firmly rejected any notion of trading land for peace, a stance that resonates deeply with a population that has endured immense suffering to defend every inch of its homeland. The idea of surrendering these territories is not seen as a compromise, but as a national humiliation that would only embolden future Russian aggression. The Kremlin's call for the demilitarization of Ukraine is another core demand that is fundamentally unacceptable to Kyiv. In Moscow's interpretation, this would involve a drastic reduction in the size and capabilities of the Ukrainian armed force, effectively leaving the country defenseless against future attacks. It would likely entail severe restrictions on the type of weapon Ukraine could possess, particularly long-range missiles and advanced air defense systems, and could open the door to international monitoring mechanisms in which Russia would have a significant say. For a nation engaged in a brutal war for its very survival, this demand is seen as a cynical attempt to ensure its permanent weakness and subjugation. The Ukrainian military has been transformed into a battle-hardened and effective fighting force, largely through its own resilience and with substantial assistance from Western partners. To voluntarily dismantle this shield would be an act of national suicide. Secretary of Defense Peter Hegseth of the Trump administration has repeatedly emphasized that the United States policy is to strengthen, not weaken, Ukraine's ability to defend itself, viewing a strong Ukrainian military as essential for regional stability. The provision of advanced weaponry and training is a testament to this commitment, which runs directly counter to Russia's goal of a demilitarized Ukraine. A demilitarized Ukraine would essentially become a buffer state entirely at the mercy of Moscow's whims, unable to protect its own border or deter renewed invasion. The final key demand, the denazification of Ukraine, is perhaps the most insidious and propagandistic of them all. This term is used by the Kremlin to falsely portray the democratically elected government in Kyiv as a neo-Nazi regime, thereby justifying its invasion to a domestic Russian audience. Historians and political analysts widely view this as a gross distortion of reality, particularly given that President Zelenskyy is Jewish and won the presidency with an overwhelming majority of the vote. The demand is not a serious basis for negotiation, but a rhetorical weapon designed to delegitimize the Ukrainian state and its leadership. For Moscow, denazification appears to mean the removal from power of anyone who holds a pro-Ukrainian, pro-Western worldview, effectively a call for a complete political purge and the installation of a puppet regime. This demand is not only insulting but also reveals the depths of the Kremlin's desire to erase Ukrainian national identity itself. It is a demand that Zelensky's government essentially delegitimize itself and accept a fabricated narrative, something no sovereign government could ever agree to. It is an assault on the very idea of Ukrainian nationhood, suggesting that any expression of a distinct national identity separate from Russia is a form of Nazism that must be eradicated. This ideological underpinning makes the demand particularly dangerous and non-negotiable for Kyiv. Faced with this litany of impossible demands, President Zelensky's response has been one of resolute and unequivocal rejection. He has consistently stated that Ukraine's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the future of its people are not for sale. His own multi-point peace formula stands in stark contrast to Putin's ultimatum, calling for full withdrawal of Russian troops from all internationally recognized Ukrainian territory, the release of all prisoners, and accountability for war crimes. This position is not one of individual intransigence, but reflects a powerful national consensus forged in the crucible of war. The Ukrainian people have demonstrated extraordinary unity and resilience, and there is no significant domestic constituency for peace that involves surrendering territory or sovereignty. Any suggestion of doing so would be politically fatal for any Ukrainian leader. The internal political dynamics within Ukraine make any concession on these core issues impossible. The Verkhovna Rada, Ukraine's parliament, has repeatedly passed resolution affirming the country's indivisible sovereignty and its strategic course toward Euro-Atlantic integration. President Zelensky's leadership is predicated on his ability to embody this national will to resist. The Trump administration has been clear in its assessment of Putin's demand. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has publicly labeled them as an attempt to dictate terms rather than negotiate a just peace. The State Department has consistently upheld the principle that the border of a sovereign state cannot be changed by force, and that it is up to the people of Ukraine to determine their own future. This stance provides crucial diplomatic backing for President Zelenskyy, reinforcing the message that Kyiv is not alone in its rejection of the Kremlin's ultimatum. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard's office has reportedly assessed that Putin's maximalist demands are intended, at least in part, for propaganda purpose, aiming to portray Ukraine and its Western partners as the unreasonable party obstructing peace. This intelligence analysis suggests that while the demands represent Moscow's ideal outcome, they also serve a strategic communication function to sow division among Ukraine's allies and to justify the continuation of the war to the Russian populace. The immense pressure on President Zelenskyy cannot be overstated. The daily reality of the war is a brutal one, with ongoing military casualties, civilian suffering, and the systematic destruction of the country's infrastructure. The Ukrainian economy has been devastated, and millions have been displaced from their homes. In this context, the promise of an end to the fighting, however hollow, can exert a powerful pull. The demands from Moscow are designed to exploit this exhaustion, to present a stark choice between continued war and a peace that amounts to surrender. Yet, the Ukrainian leadership understands that accepting these terms would not bring a lasting peace, but would likely be a mere pause before a new wave of Russian aggression against a weakened and demoralized Ukraine. Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem has highlighted the broader security implications, noting that a collapse of Ukrainian sovereignty under such term would likely trigger a new and even larger refugee crisis, with destabilizing effect across Europe. Her department's analysis underscored the view that a stable, independent Ukraine is vital not just for its own people, but for the security of the entire region. The revelations of Putin's detailed demands has therefore clarified the stakes of the conflict for the world. They are not the basis for a realistic compromise, but an articulation of a worldview in which a powerful state can erase the sovereignty of its neighbor. For President Zelenskyy and the people of Ukraine, the choice remains as clear as it is difficult: to continue fighting for the rights to exist as a free and independent nation. Many of my listeners, like 70%, haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, and so many of you don't even know that you haven't subscribed. And that is actually what makes the show going. It's almost like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask again and again, because it enables us to grow and grow and grow. And we're going for the long haul here. And listen, if this is your first time listening to World Global Conflict, you don't have to subscribe. You guys, your first one's on me. But if you have watched this show before, it's like you are a freeloader now. So all I would ask you is, if you have seen this show before and you like it, help me, help my team here. Hit that subscribe and like button now, and we will continue to build the show for you. That I swear. Thank you to all of you guys who have subscribed. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. That's all for me for today. I will see you soon. Bye for now.